Hi, welcome back to another sizzling episode of Spit or Swallow Pod with your favorite host, Hausa Chocolates. Today is a very, very special day because I have one of my favorite guests back in the studio.
Whoop, whoop.
We have Ed here who coined one of our favorite phrases from last season, dependable fucks and ratchet fucks. And today is another special day. We're going to be talking about being in the mood for sex or the mood for sex. We're going to talk about media. We're going to talk about sex and media. We're going to talk about, how I always talk about how sex is a sensory experience, all the factors that actually enhance sex, get us in the mood, keep us in the mood, all of that stuff. And as usual, when Ed is here, me, I just take the back burner and I listen to the maestro. So Ed, thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
All
And
right, take it away, master.
yeah, so the idea of so let's just kind of throw back a bit. The idea of a dependable fuck versus ratchet fuck.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of those ideas that we have are kind of shaped by the media we consume.
Mhm.
Because unfortunately for us, Nigeria and Africa, our views around sex are informed a lot by colonialism. It's a long, long history, but
Mhm.
um, I guess one of the places you look to see how much colonialism has shaped our contemporary views on sex
Mhm.
is in our native languages.
Mm.
Like anybody who speaks Hausa, like
Yeah.
Hausa has words on words on words for genitalia. There's like
Yes.
duri, there's gindi,
Bora and
there's
all those
buddha.
things.
And so it's like it's very, very specific. Like
Yeah.
because they have like before colonialism, we had very robust sex lives. We had
Mhm.
like extensive
I
conversations.
mean, the Kaya Mata was also
Yes,
also
it
a
was
thing
always so
as
these
well.
were these
Yeah.
things were a significant part of our culture. Sex was considered a social lubricant, like a social
Mm.
tool
Mm.
for, because marriage was mostly transactional, but
Yeah.
sex was social. Like sex was
Yeah.
something you did for fun, you did to
Mhm.
establish social hierarchies
Hope
and
people
all
are
sorts of
listening. Oh.
things.
When you say, oh, though our ancestors, every time people will say, oh, do your ancestors, like, look at what your ancestors were doing. I think when people think ancestors, they really stop at like
Yeah.
colonialism, but they don't really go back to what we as Africans were doing before,
Yeah, but yeah,
the
and when you
crackers colored people came to change
yes, and when you
things.
think about that and think about how much repression there is now,
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense that because we don't really have, we've lost that link to our historical like views on sex and how
Mm-hmm.
sex used to shape our cultures.
Mm-hmm.
We look to media as a place to get validation or even
Mm-hmm.
just get
And
like
guidance,
instruction, like,
yeah.
on what to do, how to do
Mm-hmm.
it. Because I still remember distinctly that in JSS2,
Mm-hmm.
somebody brought uh, hints. Hints
Mm.
was a significant part of how people see sex. A lot
Mm.
of millennials, if you ask them, hints, better
I
lover,
remember I
hearts.
remember hints. I used to read them randomly, but me, like I said, La La Land, babe. I was more of Harley Quinn and Mills and Bones. All
Yeah.
those, yeah. I always used to find all those stories kind of weird, but I guess for some people that was like a graphic representation, and then how I think Cossie they love using that babe's picture with her boobs and
Yes.
stuff.
She suffered in their she suffered in their hands. Because she was like the exaggerated because back then boobies were the
Yeah,
thing. Like
it was breast.
boobs
It
were
was
the
not
thing. No,
yansh. It was
ass is
as
relatively
is
new.
recent.
So like big boobs were the thing then. So you could literally see how media shaped
Mhm.
our understanding of what we desired sexually and kind
Mhm.
of informed indoctrinated, I would use the word,
Yeah.
indoctrinated what we saw as sexually desirable.
Mhm.
And for a lot of young people, at least for the millennial generation, we
Mhm.
kind of our first contact with sex because of how repressed and like as
Obviously, you're not
children,
learning from sex at home.
like we don't nobody talks about sex as a child in your
Mhm.
house as a Nigerian, even as an African.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about sex as a child, as a teenager. When everybody talks about sex, they talk about sex in doom and gloom terms.
Mhm.
Like if you have sex, you're going to get an STI,
Or
or you're
you're
going to
gonna get
get
pregnant
pregnant,
and
or
die.
you go to hell.
Or
There's all this
shame and stuff.
negativity
Yeah.
around it. And then because before the internet,
Mhm.
it was very hard for you to be able to access visual media.
Yeah.
And so those magazines, those smutty magazines,
Mm-hmm.
were the safest way for us
Yeah,
to
because
consume
using
sex.
CDs and stuff, I
Yeah.
mean, I have friends who have stories of how they were
And they get
watching
caught.
porn, they get caught, or like they masturbated, they fell asleep with the DVD inside, or some shit and stuff. And
Yes.
some they just deny, if even if or that thing where before, if they take lights, you can't bring the
Yes, you can't bring.
DVD.
You have to
No,
unscrew
now
the
some
DVD,
people.
and then take the CD out. So
Some people become engineers, or like I've had friends who say, "Oh my, they just went to their room and then they just deny. I don't know
or
how they
even
got there."
scatter the
It's
DVD player so that it's better let them repair it or something. And so because of we have
that's
all these,
crazy.
we have so much, like, at least for millennials, we had so much restrictions around
Mm,
sex media
mm-hmm.
that, like, for women, Mills and Boone was
Yeah.
huge
Oh,
because
that
it
was.
not only talked about sex, it also talked about foreplay,
Mm-hmm.
talked about courtship in
Mm-hmm.
like ways
Romance,
that
all
were
that
very
stuff.
explicit. And
Yeah.
so a lot of like millennial
He put his
women,
hard member.
yes, like a lot of what we expect from sex, we got from media, we got indoctrinated by
We
media.
did. We really
But
did.
for the Gen Z generation, it's completely different
Mm-hmm.
because
The world is so
they,
open.
like, the world is so open. There are some, apart from, like, because there's this idea that we like to discuss. There's the idea of the zeitgeist, and the zeitgeist kind of informs. So what the zeitgeist is like a lot of media that is created around the same time,
Mm-hmm.
influenced by the same thing, and basically shapes the public perception of an audience. And
Mm-hmm.
so every generation usually has a zeitgeist. Like for
Mm-hmm.
us, um, there are a lot of things that shaped us. Like for example, Hints, Cossey, the kind of stories they told, and those stories were heavy on infidelity. Like, man always cheats, women always. This was very straight. It was
Mm-hmm.
very straight and cis, and
Mm-hmm.
so all of those things shaped our. But for the Gen Z generation, for the first time, you can access, I call it the singularity, where all media from the last 150, 200 years is instantly accessible at the click of a button. Like, if you
Yeah.
feel like, my thing is 1920s burlesque, that's what turns me on. You
You
can
can
find
access it in
endless,
seconds.
endless media about that and just consume that exclusively. And so it's a lot harder for people to agree on what is sexy to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what am I turned on by? What is
Mm-hmm.
the general, socially accepted way?
Acceptable
Yes.
standard of beauty, because even back then you would even think about like movies and how there's always the couple, and it's always tall, dark, and handsome and light
Mm.
skin. The woman must always be lighter than the man
Yeah.
all the time. And so these are the things that even shape like the perception of the lighter the skin, the more beautiful. Those are things that influence bleaching
Hmm.
and stuff, and they get reinforced by the star babe in the music video. Even in the music group, is always the yellowest one that will be in the
Yeah.
center and stuff. So yeah, media is actually a very, very strong tool. Whoa.
Wow. And that's why, eventually,
Wait, hold on.
okay.
Okay. All
And
right.
that's why eventually everybody has their ratchet fuck that
Yeah.
they're fucking decorum
Yeah, because
because
there's stuff they tell you you want, and then there's
and
stuff
there's
that
stuff you
you
actually
actually
want.
want.
But
Yeah.
that it's and so why this shift is very important is because pornography in the 80s and 90s, if you look at pornography in the 80s and 90s, and this is not just straight pornography, pornography as a whole.
Mm.
Pornography as a whole in the 80s and 90s, where there was still a lot of repression.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that repression, and of course the HIV/AIDS crisis in the
Mm-hmm.
80s and 90s,
Yeah.
sex was very sterile,
Mm.
incredibly sterile.
Mm.
Like, pornography was sterile
Mm.
because they didn't want to give the impression. First of all, the actors in pornography then, they didn't want anybody to think that, they are
Oh, I'm
carrying around
dirty, or yeah,
diseases or I'm
yeah.
dirty.
Mm.
And then people were afraid that if they were too vulgar or hardcore,
Mm-hmm.
then they would just, like, the porn itself would basically get a lot of pushback. And
Mm.
so porn in the 80s and the 90s was very sterile,
Mm-hmm.
was very, heteronormative, was very proper because of that. And that kind of shaped us as well. But porn now is a lot more hardcore because a lot of the ideas and the values have shifted. People don't feel like, and it's partly because visual media can become very saturated very easily.
Mm-hmm.
Because then, for you to even find that one porn video, you go to your
Mm-hmm.
video club, they have like 10 cassettes in one corner,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to mice the 10 cassettes so that you don't watch all of them quickly. So, so you borrow one cassette, you wait, you
And I
watch
mean
it for
the
2 weeks,
back,
and then
yeah.
and so and even just
I'm
like
dead watching for
accessing
2 weeks.
porn.
That's crazy,
Yeah.
bro.
And even
I've
accessing the
never seen
porn
like porn
itself.
on a cassette, like those VHS
Oh no,
ones,
no,
but
no.
I
I,
definitely
I I
saw.
was old enough to see
I've
VHS.
no,
I have
I
it. I
saw
have I have a
CDs.
horror story about those VHS. My older brother, he I think he caught, because then we're using like a Betamax
Mm,
VCR,
mm-hmm.
and he borrowed one of those porn things, and he left it in this thing. And then because he was in boarding school, so he left for boarding school. And then after my mom dropped him off, and when they came back, she wanted to turn on television, saw porn,
Boom,
and the
porn.
porn was MMF. Yes.
Whoa!
so so I
For
was
that time,
scandalized. Like I
I'm
was
dead. They said
scandalized.
they thought it was you.
No, they didn't think it was they beat everybody in the house as
Oh
far,
wow! Everybody
just like
child.
even if you
Everybody
yes,
collects
like even if you
because you
must
must
have
have
known
watched
that,
it.
yeah, something. And so like porn
Oh more
then.
80s MMF. I want to see that.
I know, like I still remember it vividly. They were in like some kind of barn. There was
Mm.
hay.
Wow.
I still remember,
That's
like it was
crazy.
imprinted in
But
my
but
brain.
back then, really like clean shaven, or was
Oh
it
yeah,
like
no,
foreign?
extremely clean, like
Mm,
clean shaven.
mm.
There was like a process. The way porn now, there is and one of the things that shifted in visual porn is that people are no longer attracted to um that studio feel.
Yeah, yeah,
People don't like the
definitely.
studio
Yeah,
feel
everyone
because
is like,
anything is
yo, yeah,
overproduced, because there's so much
porn is
saturation
acting.
of media that once it feels overproduced, you start to feel like, I can't relate to them. They're not
Yeah,
authentic. And
yeah.
and and
Yeah, I think, and that's another thing with this like social media age with TikTok and influencing. The one thing every content creator says is, "Oh, authentic, authentic."
authenticity,
Yeah,
yeah.
people connect to you when they feel like you're real.
And that affects porn as well, because
Mm-hmm.
and it's not just so. It's two things with pornography, and I will get to the reason why this is important, because how sex and media is interesting, because sex is a sensory experience, and the way our brains work is that we take in data from our senses,
Mm-hmm.
and then the brain processes that
Processes it.
data
Mm-hmm.
and makes memories of that data, and
Mm-hmm.
then we use those memories to essentially navigate the world, because the
Mm-hmm.
older we get, the more complex the experiences we have, the more intelligence we need to
Mm-hmm.
navigate the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so we rely on our memories. Our memories tell us this is good, this is bad, you've experienced this before, this is how to handle this, is how to handle that. The only problem with that is that sex is not complex. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the journey to sex can be complex,
Yeah.
but sex itself is very visceral.
Mm-hmm.
It's either good or it's not good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there really isn't a gray area with sex.
Mm-hmm.
Like, mid sex is bad sex.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you hear that?
mid sex
Mid
is bad
sex
sex.
is bad sex. Hashtag mid sex is bad sex. Thank you.
Because at least with bad sex you remember,
Mm-hmm.
but mid sex, your brain literally just like, I've experienced this a million times before.
It's
It's
very
not. It is not interesting
yeah,
to me.
it's
It
forgettable.
just,
It's like
your
bruh.
brain just wipes it, because it's like your
Yeah.
brain is like, I need
Yeah,
memory
this is
space for
not yeah,
important stuff.
exactly.
This
This
is
is
so mid
not
sex is actually worse than
is
bad sex. At least with
wow.
bad sex, you're like,
I agree with that. I actually agree with that because now you know what, and that's why I always say that for me, sex is primarily for pleasure, and that's why I say I don't be forgiving people
mhm,
where it's like one time if you don't hit a certain level, you're not coming
you're
back
not coming
because
back.
yeah, because it has to slap like, and obviously you don't want to always be like, oh, sex must be mind blowing, but literally, I actually believe and I feel like good sex is extremely mind blowing
Yeah, it
because
should.
it it should fire your senses. If it's just there, then you're just not found your jam as far as I'm concerned.
And like with these things, I try to, like, when I have theories about things, I try to, um, experiment like a
Mm,
good scientist,
mm-hmm.
and
I love
ensure
it.
that my hypothesis, checks out in the real world. And so I did an experiment like 2 years ago, stroke last year, where I had a primary partner,
Mm-hmm.
and I think cumulatively about 50 times.
Mm.
Yes. So,
Okay.
and the whole point of this experience was, how do you consistently, because one of the things that people talk about with sex is that, oh, sex gets bad after like 3 or 4 times, that's why I have to
Does not
but
get bad.
consistently with the right person,
It gets
it
better.
gets
It
better.
gets
It gets
better.
better because you become a lot more familiar with the person.
Mm-hmm.
And
More
it goes back to
comfortable as
this
well.
sensory thing.
Mm-hmm.
Once you understand the person's body, and you
Mm-hmm.
understand their sensory cues, and you
Yeah.
are in tune with them, and you have that safety,
Mm-hmm.
that
It's
mutual
giving it's
consent,
giving dependable fuck all
the
over again.
fun energy. And so it's like you once you get there, it
Mm-hmm.
becomes better. And then the goal now becomes
How much better can we?
how
Oh.
quickly can we get you to your first orgasm?
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think as at the peak of this thing, it was 4 minutes.
Mm.
Yeah. So we went from, I think, like 26 minutes to four
Mm.
minutes. And
Wow.
this was just like
Test run.
we didn't need to do all of that foreplay to ease everything.
Yeah.
And one of the things that helped with that a lot was music.
Mm. Okay.
And that kind of brings me to this whole sex and media. And I think of all the media that we use to get in the mood for sex, visual media is the worst.
Of course. Because it's too
And
distracting.
yes, and sound is, it's not even just that it's too distracting. One of the primary problems with visual media
Mm-hmm.
is how we see.
Mm.
The eye basically takes in light and interprets that light, with your corneas and your lenses. They interpret the light and the back of the brain, and the brain converts that to images.
Yeah.
And because of how we've evolved to rely on our hearing, our smell, for spatial awareness. Like,
Mm.
we smell stuff long
Mm-hmm.
before we see it.
Mm-hmm.
We hear stuff long before we see it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we get those secondary cues,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you now turn to the smell or
Mm-hmm.
turn to the sound,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get visual information. So
Mm.
as a
Mm.
as a
Yeah, that's
primary
true.
source of like stimulation,
Yeah.
sight is terrible, because if you are like, you have to, like, for example, one of, like, I'm sure you've heard of these stories where somebody's like, you know what, I have to turn off the light so I can enter my mind palace when I'm
Mm.
fucking this babe. Because and so that's how sound music is very important. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's very important that if you're creating your sex playlist, which I think, first of all, everybody should have a sex playlist,
Mm-hmm.
several sex playlists for several
Yes, that's
functions
true. We're
and
supposed
several
to have
purposes.
one. We're
Yes.
supposed to have one.
Yes, where's it?
Yeah.
Where's Sweet or Swallow Sex Podcast?
No,
Like, what are you doing?
don't worry. It's going to be out. I was actually going to put it on the thing today,
And
and
that
I
playlist
even
better
wrote
be
it
good,
down.
because I will be rating you.
I'm screaming. No, it's not. It's gonna be no. I actually want to do a community playlist. We'll do a community one.
Okay, okay, great.
Let people drop in
Great.
there. Cause I have my own personal. I think I'm building my third sex playlist, and
Okay,
yeah.
okay. So, for sex playlists, which is why, and so music that falls into this very, because all music basically transports you to different places
Mm-hmm.
for different reasons. But there's
Mm-hmm.
like this narrow spectrum of music
Mm-hmm.
that transports you into that sexual
Realm.
realm, that
Mm-hmm.
realm of sexual fantasy, sexual, like, imagination and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. And I consider that sex music. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that music is a spectrum. And the
Mm-hmm.
spectrum is on two extremes.
Yeah.
One extreme I call ritual sex music, and my
Mm-hmm.
friends hate that I
It
call
was,
it
yeah,
ritual
people
sex
don't.
music.
I remember I was talking to someone about one of my classes as well, and we're talking about rituals and sex, and they're like, ritual, or he said something like "ongbe ebo" or something. I'm like, no, like, rituals are basically anything that you
You do
do. Yeah,
routinely.
routinely, exactly, with a purpose. It's like you're just being intentional. If I say, "Oh, my morning ritual," people say morning routine.
Mm-hmm.
You can interchange routine and
For
ritual,
ritual, yes.
because yeah, if it's like saying, if I say I have a sex ritual, I'm like, okay, maybe
Hmm.
I must
Like,
shower
yes,
first.
all of
I
that
put
is a
on
ritual.
music. Yeah, it's a ritual. You get, like, even when people talk about, I think it's just Nigeria, and that's negative connotation. Sometimes I even talk about even Islam. I'm like, praying 5 times a day is a ritual.
Hmm.
Do you get?
Hmm.
Because you're doing that stuff routinely with a purpose. It's not just, oh my god,
Yeah, and
rituals
because
means, yeah.
and it's an important thing that defines a ritual is that the action itself is not self-fulfilling. The action itself is in service of something else.
Mm-hmm.
That's what defines a ritual.
Yeah.
Like, I do a morning ritual because I want to have good skin. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not doing a morning ritual because, I like
I
washing
like,
my face
yeah.
20 minutes in the morning. I'm
Yeah.
doing it
But there's a
because there's a
purpose to
purpose.
it. Yeah.
There's a secondary purpose,
Yeah.
and that's what makes it a ritual, because you're
Yeah.
doing the ritual and you are expecting like a delayed gratification for that
Mm-hmm.
ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's ritual sex music
Mm-hmm.
and there's ego sex music.
Mm.
And ego, of course, it's about self gratification and about immediate gratification. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the difference between the two. And I think those are the
Would you
two.
say Nigerians are more ego sex? Nigerian music is
Yes.
more ego
No,
sex
Nigerian
music.
music is wholly egocentric. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it is ego sex all the way.
Mm-hmm.
There are very few songs. Like, I think one of the few songs about like that is like ritual sex. Even like, no, even then, even because I was going to say
Cool.
this assurance. is like a ritual sex music, but I was like, nah,
Yeah, we're gonna even talk
nah.
about the kind of songs that are in your sex plays. But yeah, go ahead
Yeah.
with
And
the
so
ritual.
for people who are focused on sex as its own reward,
Mm-hmm.
like they're having sex to have sex. They're having
Yeah.
sex for an orgasm. They're having sex to prove themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's they're mostly they gravitate towards ego
Ego
sex
sex
music
music. Mm.
because ego sex music is it kind of it has like three themes. It's usually validation of
Mm-hmm.
self, it's usually seduction of the other,
Mm-hmm.
or it's usually subversion of traditional tropes.
Mm.
Because think about like a song like WAP.
Mm.
WAP fits two of those three themes.
Yeah.
One of those themes is subversion because nobody expects a woman to talk about like
Yeah.
you know
Wet ass pussy.
yeah, wet ass
Yeah.
pussy, and so it's
Yeah.
subversion and it's seduction because she's
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what, it's
She's
she's
advertising that more
advertising
this
that,
one
yes,
now. Yeah.
like, and
Now
so
waterfall.
which is very different from like the weekend's music. Weekend's music
Mm.
is pretty much like, I would die
Mm-hmm.
if I don't deep into your waters. Your
Mm-hmm.
waters gives me life.
Yeah.
It's like, where is all of this coming from?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are we where like where's all of
But
and
yeah,
so
I'm
it's very
definitely more
ritual.
ritual. I'm definitely more ritual. Like that's what I like. I
Oh no,
like
no, from your
yeah.
playlist and like from the songs that you share, it's
Yeah,
obvious.
I'm a
Like you're
ritual
like,
babe.
yeah, she's
Like, nah, let's take like my sex playlists generally have like a style. I like the build up. I do a lot of so when you said assurance, I was like, what? Like I do a lot of songs that don't even have words because it's more about like the feeling,
yes.
and they usually start off like slow
Mhm.
and then towards the middle the tempo gets up and it gets fast. That's usually when it gets like passionate and rough and animalistic. Then it comes back down to like cuddle music
Mhm.
and just like reeling in like
Yeah.
what's happened. That's the general style of like my sex plays. I don't like the lyrics to be too distracting as well.
Mhm.
Not the one that you be, having sex with somebody, then they'll say, oh, and then you broke my heart, like calm down, jigga. But
Yeah.
then sometimes the sound and the beats is really what matters.
Mhm.
But like there's no way assurance is
Yeah, because it's interesting that you mentioned this because one of the things that really defines ritual sex music
mm-hmm,
is that it goes to great lengths
mm-hmm,
to hide the fact that I want the song to be played during sex.
mm,
It masks all of that because if that becomes the point of the song, then it loses its power. Like the
mm-hmm,
magic of ritual sex music is how ambiguous it is,
mm-hmm.
how you can basically project whatever
Yeah, whatever
whatever
you're
thing you want to
feeling,
feel into
exactly.
that
That's why
moment.
I
It's
love like
like
instrumentals and stuff. And you can just, you can create your own story, even with like music in general. That's why indie and like alternative like rock music has
Mhm.
always been my
Yeah.
favorite because sometimes they be saying gibberish and it's how it makes you feel. And then, you just carry that with you. But sometimes someone devil say, go and actually check the meaning of this thing. Or
Mhm.
when you just click one
Yeah.
link, then you don't find out, oh, this was about one school shooting. And just like Mugbe. mean, I've been using this one to think about my existential crisis and stuff. So yeah, I like that. I like being able to, immerse myself in what I'm listening to and put my own meaning.
Mhm.
There's some that, it makes sense what they're saying is, but
Yeah.
I think I've always been that kind of person who likes deep and hidden and layered meanings
Yes.
because I'm not a inspirational bop music.
Mhm.
When you drink water in
Yeah.
the morning, I'm happy. I hate shit like that. It's like, oh, what doesn't kill you? Make sure that don't play that shit near me. I like when everything is just extra.
Yeah, so and that's the thing. I think one of the things that defines ritual sex music is that it is very needy
Mm-hmm.
and very embarrassingly earnest.
Mm.
Like there's a honesty to ritual sex music
Mm-hmm.
that outside of sex is just embarrassing.
Of course.
Like you're like, why why
Yes, and sex gives you that space for that kind of
yes, it gives you the
vulnerability.
space to be
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
very embarrassingly earnest about the
Mm-hmm.
things you really want to
Want.
say or you
Yeah.
really want to experience in that moment
Mm-hmm.
because sex gives you all this momentum and then the music allows you to channel the things you really wanted, like
Mm-hmm.
because I find a lot of people like when they have a ritual sex playlist for when they're going through a breakup and they're
Mm-hmm.
going through that breakup sex and it's like there's
Mm-hmm.
all these songs where it's like I know you never wanted me
Yes.
but it's like this and you're like, why are you collecting braps?
Do you understand? Like,
Like,
yes. Then you say, yes, I bet her pussy doesn't taste as good as mine. You've never had this shit. It's like, bro,
like, why are we doing
relax.
this? But it's fine and it's understandable and it's fair because
Yeah,
we need outlets
we
and
do.
sex can be very, very transcendental.
Mm-hmm.
It can be very like, it can open up channels.
Mm-hmm.
And if it opens up those channels, what ritual sex music does, is that allows us to channel all of that raw emotion and raw
Emotion. Yeah,
energy
people, yes,
towards the
people
things that
use
we
it.
actually want to say or
Mm-hmm.
want to
Yes,
feel.
people use sex to express themselves. People use sex to say things that they cannot say.
Say
It's like,
anywhere
I
else.
don't have balls to say it, but it's like, nigga, I'm gonna tell you I love you with this writing like this. Can you see that I love you? Are you mad?
Yeah,
But
like
I think people hide. Yeah, it's called like sextimacy, where sometimes people can only access like,
yeah.
their true feelings through how expressive they are and the
And
things
I
that they do
personally,
during sex.
and so just to like circle back to what we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning. So um getting in the mood for sex is a sensory experience,
Yeah.
and you need to be deliberate about how you create that experience, because that idea of safety is also very, very much hinged on how you're able to,
The
create
atmosphere
that
you
atmosphere for
yeah
someone else to
create for
feel
sex.
safe,
Yeah.
feel warm. Because like there's some and it's very interesting because this is the one place where smell is actually more important than sound, because
Mm.
smell lingers. Like
Mm.
in That's why there are
In
people that you
memory
just smell
as
them and you're
well.
like, yeah, it's like, oh,
I'm
it
dead.
feels like home. Like,
Yes, like it's even annoying. I hate when I associate like certain perfumes and certain scents to people because like I've been out somewhere and I just smell. I was looking for somebody like, what is it? Is this nigga here? It's so annoying. But I get what you mean. I'm actually very, aside what I see is like you said, sounds and smells. I think scents are one of my biggest. I'm easily put off by if someone smells weird.
Mhm.
Nothing is going to happen there. And then and it's so funny because like there's like yes, being aroused by like perfume and musk, but then even the sweat, that mixture, even this the sense of sex itself on your
Mhm.
skin and vagina, like everything is just so arousing. It's just
Yeah,
so
which
stimulating.
and so I'm just like, let me just add, those of you that like to run and go and bath after, you need to go to therapy, because something is happening
I'm
there.
screaming. I
Go to
mean,
therapy.
it's like we said in that other episode about the seasonings of the day. Sometimes you want marinated genitals. You want a little bit of like you want to feel the
You're
heat.
going to feel it.
Feel the
So
heat.
so please be very conscientious about the kind of atmosphere you're creating for sex. And please, like, there's nothing wrong with a ritual sex playlist. And
Hmm.
I feel like more people should experience ritual sex. You know, if you are in the, and don't use it to manipulate people, because a lot of people
Yeah.
use ritual sex music to
Mm.
manipulate other people into feeling
Yeah.
like something's more
Yes,
serious than it
something is
is,
more
something's
bonding.
more important than it
Yeah.
is. Because unfortunately for us, whether we like it or not, we're listening
Yeah, and I mean,
constantly
sex doesn't always have to,
to be
look the same.
serious.
Yeah,
Like,
it doesn't always have to look like that. So a lot of times, if I have time to put on a playlist, it's because okay, maybe I've been planning. It's one of those ones where all the oils, all because there's sometimes when it's like I want a long, nice,
mhm.
drawn out session, and I want it to be memorable. And there's sometimes when it's just like I'm horny, wham
Back,
bam, thank
back,
you,
back,
ma'am,
back.
from the door, drop my pants, blah blah blah. As in this, the lights are on, everything is the sun is shining, and nobody cares about the
Mhm.
atmosphere. All you want to do there is
It's brap.
exactly. I'm not even putting on or offing anything. Just drop all the pants,
Anyway,
wrap,
sure.
and make
For
everybody
those of
rest.
those of you that are able to elicit that kind of response, I doff my hat to you all, because for the most part, it don't be working like that. We're gonna have to, like,
You
so.
you, you always need a build up.
I'm saying for some people that are able to do that, like,
Oh, okay.
I'm very jealous of them.
Mm.
Like, just the presence, your presence, sets the mood. Like,
Of course, that's. I
like,
think that's it, and I think that that's why when you think about like dependable fuck, and I think about my greatest dependable fuck, is literally each other's presence. Then when we
like,
not
it's
say,
just
okay,
enough.
some days let's enhance or whatever, but sometimes there's no time to do.
It's just
There's no time. Let's
let's get to it.
just get to it and bye bye. Thank you. See you later and
Yeah.
stuff.
So
Yeah.
please try and create a ritual sex playlist, try and create an ego sex playlist, and
And
see how you
sometimes merge both
feel
of
on
them.
both. And then, have some a transition playlist where they're
Yeah.
somewhere halfway between,
Yeah.
if you're not sure about the person, but you want the person to feel it too special,
Mm-hmm.
throw a few in, I would die for you songs in
Said I would die for you.
there.
No, he wants now. This pussy go kill me today. That's kind of playlist that these niggas need. But yeah, thank you so much. I didn't ask you to spit or swallow, but I don't remember. What did you say last
Uh,
time?
well, last time I said spit, but I'm kind of
You get
gravitating towards
into swallowing. I mean,
swallow
they've used ritual sex
because
playlist to wash your head.
because I want all of you.
Fair.
So
all consuming, all consuming. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's always a great time.
I mean, it's always a great time to like, but at some point, I'm just gonna have you here with me most of the time. So yeah, plug your socials. Where can we find you? And where can we find what you write and what you do?
At
You know, I
Goth
never
Boy.
even introduced what you do. I just start talking because I'm so excited you're here. But yeah,
Yeah, so I'm a writer, an essayist. So I have an essay called a Substack called openthecorral.substack.com. There's a bit of sex there. There's a bit of politics. There's a bit of like culture. So check it out. My socials are at Goth Boy, EDGOTHBOI. Because I used to be goth. Don't ask me any stupid questions. I'm still goth in my spirit. So
shit, I was about to sing that song. But yes, follow me at House of Chocolates. Follow the podcast at Spit or Swallow Pod on Instagram and TikTok. SOS Pod Official on Twitter. And the YouTube channel is Spit or Swallow Podcast. There's one other Spit or Swallow that when you check for them, it's them you see. So if you want to see me, just try Spit or Swallow and put Hausa and our channel will pop up. But subscribe so that we'll be the winners on YouTube. Subscribe, like, share, comment.
If you want, if you want elevated,
do you
production.
understand? Do you understand? If you want us to do Spill the Swallow Tour worldwide, subscribe, make me blue. But yes, thank you guys so much. This was great. As per usual, thank you so much for coming. I'll see you guys same time next week. Bye. Peace.